blood. And sadly, our government decided that the commercial interests of the UK came first, despite us going to the government and saying, look, well, if America can do it, why can't you? We got the same old stock response, not in the UK national interest.
Gordon Brown, who met Colonel Gaddafi earlier this year, has consistently refused to allow the interests of IRA victims to get in the way of relations with Libya. But the release of the Lockerbie bomber, Abdel Basset al-Megrahi, changed all that. Gordon Brown was blasted by an onslaught of criticism from both sides of the Atlantic. As the fallout from al-Megrahi's release continued, Jason McHugh seized the opportunity for IRA victims. He gave letters written by Gordon Brown and one of his junior ministers to the media. Letters which clearly show the government's refusal to help the victims. Hours later, McHugh got a phone call at home.
On Sunday afternoon, Downing Street rang up and they said, look, the Prime Minister wants to make his statement. He believes it is the right thing to back your clients and these victims, and he's going to make a press statement on it. So I said we needed a Foreign Office team to work with us, and they agreed to put a specialist team together of the experts in the Foreign Office and in Number 10 to work with us.
Geoffrey Donaldson says that former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Peter Mandelson, stepped in to help the government limit the damage.
I think he realised immediately that the story broke in the national press, that the government had basically said oil and gas come first. He would have realised this was very damaging. And I think it was his intervention at that stage with the Prime Minister that was crucial.
In a statement tonight, the government insists that oil and gas have never come first. But what is clear is that the campaign had brought the government to the point where it had completely changed its level of support for IRA victims.
We'll continue to step up our support by establishing dedicated Foreign Office support to the Victims Campaign. We'll appoint dedicated officers in the Foreign Office, and our embassy in Tripoli will accompany the families and their representatives to meetings with the Libyan government to negotiate compensation.
3 weeks after the release of al-Megrahi, Willie Fraser and Michelle Williamson, who lost her parents in the Shankill bomb, were part of a delegation to the United States. The primary reason for the trip was a long-planned protest against Colonel Gaddafi, but this was a new Willie Fraser. Since the government's change of policy, he now had friends in high places.
One of the reasons for coming over was to have a number of protests because Colonel Gaddafi was going to be here, but we've been asked to tone them down.
Who's asked you to tone them down?
Well, it has come from the Foreign Office, it has come from our own politicians and also the legal team, where they have been fed information to say that everything is moving along very quickly and the possibility of something taking place is very positive.
A complex set of conversations were taking place in different parts of the world. Willie Fraser was being kept in touch with events in London by Geoffrey Donaldson.
Geoffrey's going to meet the Libyans tomorrow, and he's been in touch with the Foreign Office here, and the British Embassy are taking a keen interest, and as a matter of fact the Ambassador himself has taken an interest, and hopefully we'll be in touch. So hopefully we'll hear this morning from the British Embassy who will be able to help us out.
So Geoffrey Donaldson's meeting the Libyans at the embassy in London tomorrow. Are you surprised by how fast this is moving? It's moving very quickly now.
It certainly is. A lot of things have changed. A lot of people who weren't speaking to us are now keen to speak to us. So it's a good sign.
Minutes later, an invitation came through from the British Embassy.
The British Embassy meeting this afternoon, 3:30. They're sending me for the room.
Is that confirmed?
Well, if you just give me a ring now to confirm timing.
Right, no problem. Well, that ties in with the email I got from Geoffrey, or sorry, the text I got from Geoffrey.
We don't know the exact detail, but sources close to the negotiations have told us what's on the table. Potentially £500 million to be paid into some type of trust fund for the victims of IRA violence.
And we're hearing that also on the table, potentially money for the victims of Loyalist and state violence, is the inclusion of those victims in any deal that's being hammered out behind closed doors. Willie Fraser had an hour-long meeting at the British Embassy. How'd it go?
Very well. I'm actually very impressed. Things have obviously moved a lot.
What had obviously moved since his arrival in the States was that he had been sounded out on the idea of a much wider compensation fund, which could include not only IRA victims, but victims from all sides. Any more indications coming that these proposals may include other victims, apart from the victims of IRA terrorism, that other victims will be included?
At the end of the day, if we get the people looked after that need to be looked after, we're not interested in what happens after that. If other people can benefit, so be it.
You've always said that the perpetrators should never benefit.
Yeah, I've always said that, and I still believe that. But what I'm saying, that's not my call. My call was that we would do all we could to bring people to account for what happened over this last 35 years. If this is successful, we will have done that. Now, what happens after that is down to our politicians.
At the Libyan embassy in London the following day, there was a further hint that the compensation fund was to be extended to include all victims.
The key word that's now being talked about is reconciliation. In the context of the Northern Ireland peace process, there are other countries in the past who have made a contribution towards reconciliation here. And I think the Libyans, prompted by our own government, are now seeing that, well, actually, maybe we should be making a contribution, a financial contribution, towards healing and reconciliation in Northern Ireland.
But how would Willie Fraser feel about his fight for compensation turning into a reconciliation fund?
If there is something in there that can help bring the whole thing to a finish completely, well, we're not going to stand in the way of that.
So what you're saying is that in order to bring this to a close, you're willing to reach out to the victims of state violence as well?
Well, I think it has to be an option, but it's going to be their decision. You know, we're making a big step here by saying we're not ruling you out of this, but you have to realise that the innocent victims from them have come first, and their problems are being dealt with.
You said that the driving force in your life was to bring the IRA to account. Do you think you've done that now?
I believe we have, yeah. If this deal is done.
But Willie Fraser was not going to leave America without joining protesters outside the United Nations in New York.
How you doing, folks? Willie Fraser. So pleased to meet you. How you doing? I'm pleased to meet you. Nice to meet you. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Frank Dugan is the head of the Lockerbie Support Association. A first-generation Irishman and former head of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, he has pledged to support IRA victims in their quest for compensation.
This was pretty much a dead story up until very recently. It's a 20-year-old story that people have kind of forgotten about. And then all of a sudden, Scotland let the bomber go home, and Gaddafi gets to come to New York for a platform, and it's really re-energized all of us. Gaddafi is a butcher! A butcher, Muslim!